So welcome to week 2 of the course, Game Design for Learning. And this week we're going to be talking a little bit about designing games really for learning or educational purposes. So the first week was awesome. I think that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. The activity on the forums has been really amazing. A lot of you are jumping in and arguing over stuff. A couple things. First, apologies on the downvote thing. For those of you who are in the forum and know what I'm talking about, people decided they didn't like the downvote portion of the assignment, so we took that out. Two, thanks to all of you who've been going in and really helping one another. There's one student in particular, Dean, I'm going to get your last name wrong, Utian or Ushin, who's been awesome, helping people, pointing other people different parts of the forum. We really appreciate it and really like the enthusiasm. I should say from my perspective, so far the biggest kind of surprise or fun thing really has been seeing everyone's enthusiasm and then just noting how international and multicultural it is. I mean, we knew this would happen. We knew opening a massively online course to the world would get this, but it's really kind of humbling seeing how many different people with all of your interests and skills and expertise. And we're excited about how the class is coming together. Some of you may have seen this, but there are little special interest groups popping up. So there's a Spanish-speaking Facebook group. There's a Scandinavian or Nordic group that just started. There's a graduate student and people doing research that have started. We're going to try to interact with these groups in positive ways as we find them and as we figure out how to best support them. So please try to bring it to our attention if there is something happening, because as you've noticed, there are 50 pages of threads on the forums. There's a lot going on. Also, you should know that we are dipping into the forums. Many of you probably saw my comments. We have 4 or 5 folks on staff. Ryan Martinez, the TA. There's other people here from the University of Wisconsin, the Do It folks who get in there. So most of the things are actually getting read and moderated, and we're trying to interact as much as we can. But again, there's just so much activity that it's pretty exciting. It's hard for one person or two to cover. So this week, Constance, my wife, Constance, your co-teacher, is doing some work for the National Science Foundation in Atlanta. So she's not going to be doing this video, but she's still following along online. But what we do have is Brian Pelletier, one of my colleagues, who did the majority of the animations, like with the James Paul G videos. A lot of the hand-drawn animation stuff is mostly Brian's work. Also, Adam Weens did some of them too. Yes. So he will be talking with us today a little bit about the design of games and how games get built. And Brian's actually an experienced commercial entertainment game designer, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Pelletier. I'm the creative director and the head of game development here at the GLS and Learning Games Network. My background is 18 years at Raven Software and Activision, making probably about 16 retail games in that time. Coming here and taking a lot of that experience and knowledge and applying it to games and learning.
So Brian's a creative director in our lab, manages all of the game development, manages the teams, gives feedback, helps with all the production. I've learned a tremendous amount getting to work next to Brian and see how he does this. Although I've done academic game development, it's interesting you get to work with a professional who does this for a living and knows what they're doing. So I think we should maybe go ahead and give a quick tour of the lab. We thought one way to kick off this week is talk a little bit about how games for learning get built. Using our lab as one example, there are multiple different versions, but we can talk a little bit about some of the work that happens here and then use that as a springboard to talk about designing games for learning. The reading is a article that I wrote. It's getting a little dated, 6 or 7 years old, but it was in Educational Researcher, which is one of the premier education research journals. And it's really trying to give us a model for how we think about going beyond simple kind of memorization tasks and how we get away from kind of trivia style games and toward really having the game mechanics be where the learning occurs. And so that's been a lot of what my interest has been, and that's kind of what's covered in the article. And then the videos really underscore that point. So you have people like David Gagnon talking about situated learning theory and place-based learning and some of the work he's doing with mobile devices. Liz Lawley, another colleague, talking about customization and choice. So we're starting to broaden out the videos a little bit so you'll get a broader sense of the field. But this week, something I really want you to think about are what are the theories of learning behind that? And if you take Jim's principles and then think about designing educational games based on those. So not educational games where you're only memorizing and spitting back for a test, but where you're doing things and you're thinking creatively and you're designing. That's the real challenge. I'll say that the field, I think, has grown a lot in the last 10 years, where you're starting to see games of that sort get developed, and being researched, and I think hopefully in the next couple of years we'll see a lot more widely available.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, like those
Yeah.
James Paul G videos. That was something like you and Constance came forward and said, you know, we've got a lot of talking heads, basically. A lot of people talking to you. Is there something we can do to amp up those, and not only amp them up, but also help even explain what's being said in the spoken word? And that's where they approached some of the artists here. And yeah, it's been a thrill to just like listen to the principles that James Paul G is talking about, and then think about like how those can be applied to like a visual metaphor or even a literal sense, just to kind of help convey that. So that's, I think, a good foresight upon you guys to, you know, provide that sort of like extra.
Well, it was partly accidental, actually, because we first thought we would just record our normal lectures and kind of put them up, and those aren't that exciting to watch online at 45 minutes at a time. And as we did that, we thought, well, you know, what are we trying to do with this MOOC? And we thought, well, you know, as education and technology people, we really felt it was incumbent upon us to do a good job and help create a vision for what this medium could be. And so we started thinking, you know, rather than just say setting up a camera, what if we could create high quality resources that would get used in the course and then beyond it? So we have noticed from the forums that already there's one person who's taking those back to their own classes, and we really want to encourage that. We think it's great. So these are all open and shareable resources. And we were thinking that if we could kind of use some of the energy and enthusiasm behind a MOOC to create resources that are even better than what just a canned lecture would be, because, you know, it's all done in one take and you don't have professional animation to go with it, then maybe this could suggest how these courses could be very helpful to the field, supporting learning both online and then in more traditional settings too. All right, so welcome to GLS, the Games Learning Society Center here in Madison, Wisconsin. And this is the place we work. We thought we would give you a quick tour of it just as a way to understand how games are made. For me, at least, one of the best ways that I came to understand how games got built and what goes into it was actually kind of seeing the people that do it and how it works organized and so on. So right away, right here, I'll cut to Brian.
Yeah.
Start talking about it.
Yeah, so part of the process of making games when you start is creating pre-visualization or initial concepts. And the importance of these concepts at the beginning of that design phase or the development phase is to really get a sense of what the game is going to look like when it's done. And it really helps us get that good kickstart on that project. And talk about kickstarting, we've got one of our projects over here. That's where we have software engineers and our data analytics people who are working on one of our projects in this section. And then we'll work our way around and get to see some of the other pods and you know, how we're formed.
So one unique thing about learning game development is you have to do a lot of prototyping and testing. So you can see on the maps all the schools that we work with where we get kids to see how the games are working, and then do formative research as well to see, to kind of understand if they're working for the learning games you want them to. Something else that's unique about this lab is that we do have PhD students and teachers and outreach people and developers all working in the same mix. We think that that's really the best way to get good quality educational games, but there's a lot of different models that people are using.
Exactly. So like in the space, so like here's where we'd have the PhD students and the researchers, and then just right in this section is the artists. And this is our art pod over here, and this is where we'll start with the initial ideas and concepts of the games and the visuals that you saw. And just to speak about the process a little bit and how we go through this art pipeline, is you would start with a concept art. That concept art would go to a 3D modeler. A 3D modeler would build it in a software program virtually. That model then goes over to an animator who could animate it. Goes to a texture artist who would actually texture it or put the skin on that model, so that you have visually what it looks like, both 2D and then 3D. And then it goes into the game with the software engineers who put in the game, and then the designers who then make that gameplay happen on that object in the game, and where you interact with it inside the game.
So in that pod over there, we have our software engineers who really are writing the code that's the rules that govern how the world works, how the interactions work. And so that's basically there's kind of your Cliff Notes version of partly how a game gets made. So this week we'll be talking a little bit. The activity will be a little bit about categorizing games and starting to think about what different genres of games are and how those might work within educational games. Just as a reminder too, that we are just now, I think, starting to really get our stride as a field in terms of making games where the rules of the world are the same rules that you want people to learn in that content domain. So part of the activity is getting you to think a little bit more about that, and also just keeping it open. I would encourage you to keep an open mind and thinking not just about how games as they are, but how are they going to be 5 and 10 and 20 years from now as we collectively kind of invent the future of this field.